Right. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Doc. Good
Yes.
evening.
All right. Okay, well, we give the others another 2 minutes and then we can get going. I hope people find it interesting for those who are online. So we may be starting another two minutes just to make sure everyone's on. There's more than one way people can connect. Some people might connect using YouTube. All right. Well, it's just about 5 past the hour, and we usually try to start by that time for those who have other deadlines. Today's a little less interesting than other days because it will be mainly me talking. But I did think we wanted to talk a little bit about blood pressure again, even though it's a topic we've covered. And the reason for it is really just looking at a number of the reports that we've been getting from participants who have been part of the project. We're looking at a lot of blood pressures and we're seeing that they're much higher than we'd like them to be. For people who have established high blood pressure, that the levels are a lot higher, and we thought it would be an area that would be of interest. We are also a little concerned that sometimes when people get the readings, it doesn't sort of hit home to them about what it really means. And so as part of the second half, we'll just talk a little bit about what the blood pressure numbers mean. And then hopefully if there are questions, you can put them in your chat or other places, and we can try and address that before the evening is out. So welcome back to our live talks. It's been a little while since we've had them. We took a little break, but we're back again, and we continue through the rest of the year. As usual, we start with just a little introduction to the project and what this live project is about. We start by just presenting some data that we have. These are data from Jamaica from the last lifestyle survey, which was done in 2016. And one of the things that the survey was looking at was that the number of persons who had chronic diseases. And this is data looking at obesity, which is measured by the body mass index, which is your weight for your height, and a value of over 30 means that you're very overweight, you're in the obese category. What you can see here is that there's a large proportion of persons in Jamaica who are obese. It's a lot more common in women than men, almost twice as common in some situations, and that the levels of obesity increase with age, so that even the most recent studies are showing that half of the women in Jamaica have a body mass index over 30, which puts them at very high risk for a number of chronic diseases. And of course, because of the obesity, we are seeing a similar pattern when it comes to diabetes, because being overweight or obese, in addition to other factors, is a big risk factor for this condition. And what you're seeing here is that as people get older, the number of persons who are living with diabetes increases. And because there's a lot more obesity in women compared to men, the rates of obesity are higher in women at almost every age once you get into the mid 40s. Of note, once people are in their 70s, you're looking at nearly 40% of the population having diabetes. Hypertension is actually a lot more common. That's what we're going to focus on today. Blood pressures, the number of people with high blood pressure increases generally with age. It's about the same in men and women. And by the time people are in their 70s, you're looking at nearly 3/4 of the population having high blood pressure. Very few people without this condition. And so these chronic diseases have really become the main cause of death in persons who are over 5 years old for Jamaica. In men, external causes, which would be like road traffic accidents, violence, and so on, are still the leading cause of death. But apart from that, every other leading cause of death is a condition that is related to a chronic disease. So your cerebrovascular disease or stroke, your diabetes, your heart disease, and cancers. These are all conditions that are the leading cause of death, both in men and women. And this is from statistics from 2018. So because of the high burden of these non-communicable diseases and the impact that they're having, we want to do a number of studies to understand why this is and what we can do to help to prevent or treat them better. And one of the approaches that we're doing to understand what's going on is a cohort study. And that's what the LIFE project is about. A cohort is a follow-up study, and it's not a very commonly used study design. Most people are accustomed to doing a survey and then never hearing from the people again. But with a cohort study, we're actually following people over time, because that's the best way for us to understand whether or not a particular behavior or factor is an important determinant or cause of whether people go on to develop certain conditions or certain complications. And because we're collecting the information sometimes before the onset of conditions or diseases we're interested in, we can follow to see whether these factors can cause more than one disease. And they actually are important, this study design, because these are the study designs that can prove for us or provide us with the best evidence on why people are developing disease. So if we want to understand if what people are eating is affecting their health, then the best way for us to understand it is to ask those questions before they're ill and follow to see if those who are eating a certain way are more likely to develop a condition over time or not. If you want to know if a particular practice, exercise, or other things might increase or reduce the risk of a particular condition, we look at what people are doing now, we follow them over time and see what has been happening in those who exercise and those who don't exercise. And those differences are the things that will help us to be certain that this particular behavior or factor may play a role in whether or not people get a particular condition. So the LIFE project is an island-wide study. We've been so far in about 5 parishes. We're getting ready for now for St. Elizabeth and also for St. Anne. And it's a build-on of the last survey. So the data I presented earlier was from the last Jamaica Health and Lifestyle Survey, which is an island-wide survey to look at the number of people with chronic diseases in the island. So we're going back to look for some of those participants who were in that study back in 2016. And then in addition to those persons, we're going house to house for persons living in those communities to see if they're interested in participating. And other persons who meet the eligibility criteria are also free to join. What does the project involve? It involves a number of things. It involves a questionnaire that people will have to complete, which asks about different risk factors for non-communicable diseases, cancer, heart disease, diabetes. And we also collect specimens, blood and urine, hair and nails, because sometimes those tell us about exposure to certain toxins that can increase the risk of cancer. We have not been doing much saliva because of COVID and safety issues related to that, but we may go back to doing that over time now that the pandemic is coming to an end. And then, of course, we will be following them over time to see whether they have developed any of the conditions we're looking at. Diabetes, any form of heart disease, cardiovascular disease, which could be stroke or heart attack or anything else of that nature, and cancers. And so it involves the questionnaire, giving specimens, and then taking part in follow-up visits. How will it help you? Well, this is one of the things that we're hoping that it will do, help you to understand what your health is like. If there are any specific issues that are going on that you need to address, it will help us to understand what is going on in Jamaica. What are the things that we need to pay attention to when it comes to factors that are affecting people's risk of developing these non-communicable diseases? The specimens that are provided can be used to help us to understand whether new tests are good at identifying persons who have cancer, or can tell us whether somebody's going to get heart disease or diabetes. And these are all efforts that will help us to prevent people from getting these chronic diseases and also help us to treat them better. So this is a list of investigators, primarily from Jamaica, the Caribbean Institute for Health Research, but also two of the principal investigators are from the US, Dr. Camille Reagan, who is a professor at the Fox Chase Cancer Center in Philadelphia, and Dr. Kimlin Ashing, who is at the City of Hope Cancer Research Center. And Dr. Reagan is Jamaican, Dr. Ashing is from Trinidad, so both Caribbean persons, and they are very interested in helping to ensure that research that is needed for the Caribbean is also being done. And then you may have met with some of these persons who are listed here on the slide, and if you haven't met with them yet, you'll meet with them later. This is our last image from the this is what our logo is based on. So you see the logo to the side, the Life Project is based on the baobab tree, which is a tree that is seen in Africa. It's a very strong tree that has very deep roots, and very often when when there's harsh climate, this is really a source of food, nutrition, and support for a lot of animals and people. And so we hope that this project will flourish and bring benefits to the people of Jamaica, not just people of Jamaica, the Caribbean, and other Black populations throughout the world. So that's our introduction. So typically we would have a chance to tell you about somebody else who's going to be talking, but today it is about me. So let me know if you are able to see the screen, and you can go from there. As it says, my screen sharing is paused, so I hope that, let me just make sure I stop sharing and start again. Okay, let's see if this works. Okay, good. All right. So, as I said earlier on today, we want to talk about hypertension again. It's a common condition, as you saw already from the data, with a lot of people being affected and living with the condition. It's a condition that we're concerned about because it has a lot of implications for health. And when it's not well controlled, it does create quite a bit of burden. These are some data, not as fresh as the ones that I showed you, but this is really what has been happening to Jamaica over the years. This is an old study looking at death certificate data from the Registrar General to look at the causes of death in Jamaica over a number of years, from the 1940s until recently in the 2000s. And what you can see here is that there's been a general shift in the main causes of death in Jamaica. In the 1940s, there's a lot of issues with tuberculosis, kidney problems, syphilis, infectious conditions. But by the 1980s and going forward, we saw where these infectious conditions were not really the main causes of death. What we're beginning to see were things like stroke or cerebrovascular accidents, heart disease, cancers, diabetes. And that has continued over the years into what we're seeing now. And hypertension is actually one of the big contributors to what we're seeing with that pattern of disease, because a number of those conditions, the stroke, the heart disease, and hypertension, hypertensive heart disease, heart failure, is a result of years of blood pressure, which has not really been well controlled. Hypertension is important because the rates are very high. And as you saw earlier in the slide, as you get older, the rates of high blood pressure increase to the point where when people are in their 70s, you're looking at nearly 3/4 of the population having elevated blood pressures. And when we look at the trends, this is the data that you saw was from the last lifestyle survey, which I showed earlier in 2017. But when we're looking at trends from other surveys, because we've been doing lifestyle surveys since 2001, and for high blood pressure, you can see that in 2001, about 20% of the population had high blood pressure. And then when you're looking at the data for 2017, that's gone up nearly 50% to where a third of the population, when you look at people over 15, are living with hypertension. So blood pressure is important because the circulation is affected by your blood pressure, and every part of the body requires blood, a circulation of blood for functioning. When the blood pressure is elevated, it puts a lot of strain on the organs that are being supplied by the blood, and also it affects the vessels that carry blood to the various organs. And so when the blood pressure is not well controlled, it can result in a number of complications. We spoke about a few earlier, but stroke or what I saw in those slides, cerebrovascular accidents, is an important one. It can affect your vision, so people can have vision loss from years of uncontrolled hypertension. It affects the heart, because it can result in a heart attack, or it can result in the heart not pumping properly. That's what we call heart failure. So fluid builds up in the lungs, and there are other issues. It affects the kidneys. The kidneys are the organs that help to purify the body and remove toxins. And when the blood pressure is very high, the kidneys will be damaged, and that can result in kidney failure to the point where people may need to go on the dialysis machine in order to survive. And we know how expensive and how difficult dialysis can be in Jamaica. And of course, it affects the sexual organs, which are also supplied by blood. So in a number of the whole body, any part of the body where blood is flowing will be affected by the levels of blood pressure. And if the blood pressure is not controlled, it increases the risk of those complications. So we realize that managing high blood pressure can really be a big game changer, because if we can prevent somebody from getting a stroke and being disabled and unable to function or not being able to speak, if we can prevent somebody from going blind, if we can allow them to continue to function because their heart is pumping okay, that they're not on dialysis with kidney problems, or not dealing with other complications of hypertension, it can really make a big difference to quality of life. So when we do the blood pressure, we are getting two numbers. So whenever you hear the blood pressure, you will hear a top number, which is what we call the systolic blood pressure, and a bottom number, which is called the diastolic blood pressure. The top number is usually is higher than the bottom number, and this top number, or systolic blood pressure, is the blood pressure when the heart is pumping as its strongest. So the heart is always pumping, and there are times when the heart is contracting and pushing blood out into the circulation, and the force that is exerted or that the vessels are feeling is the top number. And then when the heart is relaxed again, then the pressure in the vessels goes down, and that is a lower number, or your diastolic blood pressure. So a normal blood pressure, and this is very important, is a blood pressure of less than 120 as the top number and less than 80 as the bottom number. So a lot of people say, oh, blood pressure 120, 80, 120, 80. That is when the blood pressure starts to become abnormal. Your blood pressure is normal when that top number is less than 120 and when that bottom number is less than 80. When your systolic is less than 120 and your diastolic is less than 80. Once you hit 120 or 80, 120 as the top number or 80 as the bottom number, then you're moving into the elevated blood pressure category. So that is now considered abnormal. That's an abnormal blood pressure once you're at 120 or higher for the top number, or 80 or higher for the bottom number. We still talk about high blood pressure when you're getting into the range of about 140. So in Jamaica, we still use 140. So once the top number is 140 or higher, or the bottom number is 90 or higher, then you are in the high blood pressure category. And it doesn't matter whether it is the top number or the bottom number that is abnormal. Once either of them is abnormal, then you are in the high blood pressure category. In the US and in some countries, so this is a table which is based on the American Heart Association. They talk about blood pressure being elevated or talking about high blood pressure at 130. Once the blood pressure is 130 or higher or 80 or higher, they talk about you having high blood pressure. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be on medications, but the reason why they're wanting to make the level of blood pressure lower, to say, rather than wait until you get to 140 or 90 to say you have high blood pressure, is that the risk of complications from blood pressure don't just start when you get to 140. The higher the blood pressure is, the greater the likelihood of complications. And so the lower your blood pressure is, the better off you are. And so for that reason, they are suggesting that if you can have a blood pressure of less than 130 or less than 80, that's even better for you than a higher blood pressure of 140 over 90. Usually when we get to the stage of 140 over 90 is when we start to think about medications. For some persons whose blood pressure is not quite there, if they're at very high risk for heart problems, we may also think about starting medications in them even before it gets to the 140/90, which is used. And of course, when the blood pressure is very high, and this is what we are surprised at, because when we are doing the blood pressures in the field for persons who are in the study, and their blood pressures are coming up at 200 at the top number or 100 and something as the bottom number, those are numbers that we really are thinking about as panic results. And those are things that could tell us that, you could be in danger, your health could be in danger. And we usually encourage you to go in to get your checkup or to be evaluated or to resume, if you haven't been taking your tablets, to take your tablets again when we're seeing readings in that range. That range is in the dangerous category. Now, a lot of people are saying, okay, unless your blood pressure is very high, it doesn't matter. So the other day I was in the office and a patient was saying, oh, if your blood pressure is, if it's 100 plus your age and it's not higher than that, it's okay. That's not okay. It doesn't have to get to 100 plus your age for you to worry about it. Once your blood pressure is going over the 120 as the top number or over the 80 as the bottom number, you're in a stage where we need to think about what is going on. You may not need medications, but if you know that high blood pressure is running in your family or that you may be at risk for complications for hypertension, it may be a good time for you to pick up that it's time to change, to make a change and see if I can bring my blood pressure back down or prevent it from going higher. So what are the things that put somebody at risk for developing high blood pressure? Well, we can usually divide it into two things, what we call non-modifiable, meaning that these are things that cannot change. There's nothing that we can do to change it. And we talk about modifiable risk factors. These are things that we can do something about. So some things that we can change: your genetics, who you are, who your parents are, their history of these conditions. So for instance, if your mother or father have high blood pressure, then you you are at higher risk of developing high blood pressure. And that's a genetic, because that gene is passed on from your parents. As you get older, there's nothing you can do about getting older. And you saw the data that as you get older, your likelihood of developing high blood pressure is higher. Some groups, some person groups, and we usually talk about Black populations having a lot of issues with blood pressure, then we see that Black persons may be more likely to have high blood pressure than people from other ethnicities. In Jamaica, it's predominantly Black, so there's not really much that we can do about it. And then, of course, unlike other settings where in other countries it's the men who have most of the high blood pressure. This slide, as you can see, is not from Jamaica. In Jamaica, both men and women have a high level of high blood pressure. So whether you're male or female doesn't really change your likelihood of hypertension. But apart from those things which we call the non-modifiable, these are things we can't do anything about. There are a number of things that we can change. So we know that blood pressure is related to things like our salt intake and our diet, what we're eating. So if we're having a lot of foods with salt or processed foods, or adding salt to our foods, then that will increase our blood pressure. We know that blood pressure is related to weight, and you saw the numbers where you saw how much obesity we have in Jamaica. So as long as we continue to have a very obese population, the number of people with high blood pressure is going to continue to be high. Cigarette smoking and alcohol use are other factors that can increase blood pressure. And of course, regular exercise is a factor, or lack of it will increase the blood pressure, but regular exercise can reduce it. So those are things that we have control over, and that's why we call them modifiable, because these are not things that we are unable to adjust. These are things that we can make choices about in our everyday life as to how we want to prevent or manage blood pressure. So I'm going to talk about a couple of things, and I'm sure a lot of people know all these things, what I'm talking about. And I'm hoping that in the discussion, if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat, or anything that you want to ask, you must feel free to ask, because a lot of what I'm telling you is not anything new. Everybody likes natural things, and that's a very interesting thing about Jamaicans, and I guess people in general. If there's a way to manage a condition naturally, you want to try and do that. And we saw where one of the things that can affect the blood pressure is our diet. And here what you see is that are natural, in other words, unprocessed, natural foods, particularly our fruits, which contain not just, which are not just low in salt, but also will contain other elements like potassium and magnesium, which will help to bring down your blood pressure. Your vegetables, which could also contain those foods. Your whole grains, so you're trying to eat things as natural as possible. Avoiding fatty foods like your full milk and ice cream, and eating a lot of low-fat dairy, that's better. Avoiding fat from foods like fried chicken, or the things with a lot of chicken skin, and fatty meats that we know about, like or oxtail and so on, not to have those regularly, and nuts and vegetables, legumes, peas and beans. These are things that will help to lower blood pressure. So the more of these that you have in your diet, the lower your blood pressure is. And of course, limiting foods that contain saturated, that is things that are fatty or oily. And a lot of saturated and other kinds of foods are coming from processed foods. So when you're purchasing things that are in the can or are processed, a lot of the food that is coming from the restaurant, a lot of things are added to it, and those can actually be harmful and raise blood pressure. Even things that you may not think about, things like your crackers and bread, can be very high in salt. You may not recognize it because you're not looking at the labels, but those are foods that are high in salt, and by eating a lot more of them, you're increasing your blood pressure. Trying to avoid sugary drinks and sugar sweetened beverages, your soda, having that in very limited quantities is important. And of course, limiting your alcohol intake. So the idea for eating is natural foods, as unprocessed as possible, the whole foods rather than the juice or the extract, and avoiding a lot of the packaged or canned foods where possible, and avoiding a use of salt and a lot of salt seasonings, which can be very important when it comes to the blood pressure. Being active is also a very important part of managing your blood pressure. The recommendations are for you to do at least 150 minutes of moderate physical activity every week. And here you see an example of how you can get to the 150 minutes by doing 30 minutes 5 days a week. Why is this thing coming about 30 minutes 5 days a week? The benefits of exercise will only to a large extent come in when you are doing it on a regular basis. So if you only exercise on one day of the week and you don't do anything the rest of lose some of the benefits of exercise. You have to be consistent with it. And so the more days of the week that you're able to exercise, the better off you will be. And so we ask people to try and do something almost every day. In fact, the recommendation is that 2 days should not go by without any form of exercise. And the exercise can include a number of things. It can be your walking, which is a very simple exercise that most people can do. You can do your gardening, and you can be more intensive if you want, but we have to think about what is convenient and makes sense and something that you want to be doing on a consistent basis. Most people, when it comes to exercise, they focus a lot on things like the walking, but another important aspect of exercise is your strength training, making sure that you remain flexible, and stretching. Those are also important. And I'm going to show you some of these things. So in other words, the walking is good, but your exercise program should include some strength training, some stretching, and then also making sure that you remain flexible. So because a lot of people have a lot of challenges with exercise, maybe there's issues with places to go or safety, I thought I would include a few of these links, which I think I've asked Joy to put in the chat for anybody who wants to kind of look at a couple of them. I'm going to see if I'm going to stop sharing and hope that I can find my thing to show the video. So I'm going to see now if I can show the video. Give me a second here and let me see if I'm as good at this computer thing that I say share screen video. So this is one of the resources that I am sharing with you. This one is from the National Institute of Aging. Let me stop sharing. I think I have to do something else that I'm supposed to do when I'm sharing a video. Share sound, optimize video clip, and then do that. All right, so this is one I like to refer a lot of my patients to. You can see the link here if you go to YouTube, National Institute of Aging, and I'm just going to play just a couple of minutes, and I'm going to fast forward it that you can see what an exercise workout could look like. Okay, and so far you're not seeing anything. It's still looking for it. All right, let me see if I refresh it, if it makes a difference. Maybe I'm not allowed to transmit it on YouTube. Let me stop sharing for a second. Let's see if I can try the link and see if it works any better.
Hi, welcome to Go for Life, an exercise campaign from the National Institute on Aging at NIH. My name is Sandy McGrath. I'm a personal trainer and fitness instructor. We're going to do a sample workout, so you'll be able to watch me and follow along. With Mitter, Irene, Rizal, and Jerry. For equipment, you'll need a sturdy chair with arms, 2 equally weighted objects, like dumbbells, soup cans or water bottles, 2 tennis balls, and a towel. I'll be teaching at a more challenging level with Irene and Mitter, while Grizel and Jerry will do modified versions of the same exercises. Always listen to your body. We're going to start with our warm-up. Every time you exercise, you should always warm up before you start doing strength exercises. How's everybody feeling?
Great.
You guys ready to go?
Yes.
Yep. Let's start with our warm-up. Here we go. So we're going to start with a march. And so what we're doing is we're warming up the muscles and getting the blood flowing, raising the heart rate just a little bit. So you want to start out slow, and then you can just pick it up as you want to. So we're going to march for 4, 3, 2 more, and get ready. We're going to take it right to a step touch right now. Here we go. Step touch. Now, when you're doing your warm-up, If you don't do it exactly like I do, that's okay. Because all we're doing is warming up those muscles. So you want to have good posture, abs in, shoulders back, and head up. We're going to do 4 more, guys. And 3. Or a goalpost position. So take it up.
It's an example of some strength.
And you can use different things when you're doing this. You can use, soup cans, water bottles. I'm using dumbbells. Here we go. We've got 4 more to go. And 3. And if we're working the hips or the abductors, we've got 3 more. Last 2. And just 1 more. Now, shake it out or do little steps. And we're going to move right over to the other side. Here we go. Left side. Take it out. And then they just walk away. But stretching and flexibility is so, so, so important. So what I'd like you to do, once again, pull down. And relax it just 1 more time. Let's do it 1 more time. Now this time we're going to hold it for that 15 seconds. So hold. You at home too. Keep the elbows tight to the side of your head. That way you're really stretching out the shoulder, the triceps. And let's go ahead and point the toes. And let's point them up to the ceiling. Okay, this time we're going to hold it for a little bit longer and point. And hold it for 5, 4, 3, 2, and back up to the ceiling. You guys feel that working? Good job. Good job. Okay, hold it for 5, 4, 3, 2.
All right. So that's one example of a resource, and you can find those on the internet. Go to YouTube and just look for that National Institutes of Aging, or you can click on the link. There are a couple of other resources that people sometimes don't use. This is another one I'm going to just share with you briefly, which is one that we call Walk at Home. Let's see now. Okay, let me go to my... So if you again go to YouTube, and the reason why I'm putting some of these forward is that sometimes for exercise, there's a lot of issues with safety or finding somewhere to go that is reasonable. And so because of that, these are some options that you can consider. This one, hijacking.
Hi, everybody. Come on in. We're going to walk 1 mile, and you will never believe how easy it is, how fast it is, every muscle involved. It's for everybody. Come on, everybody. Let's walk. You ready, guys?
Oh, yeah.
I got my walkers with me. Here we go. All right, 4 easy steps are our program. So let me show you how to do it. This is our warm-up. We walk in place, just an easy march. I find the pace, that beat is absolutely part of the workout. It's what I follow, so I'm sure I can give you a great aerobic workout. Okay, it's walk, 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 walk. Side steps are coming up next, side steps. Ready? Step out to the side. It's out together, out together. Good. So this is one of our basic steps. We use it a lot. We add on to this. From this single, we go to doubles, we go to 4s. Don't worry. I know you can do it. If you can do this, step out together, out together. 2 more, guys. Here's 1. Here's 2. Back to walking. We always go back to walking. That's why it's so wonderful.
All right. So you see there are a number of resources that are available, and these are free. So just going to YouTube and finding a couple of them. These are important options that we should consider for physical activity in our setting. We know that it's not always safe because of the time or the weather, and there are things that we have to do a little bit differently, but these are here. And I like, as I said, the Institute of Aging is one that I recommend because it as a mix. It gives you a short workout, longer workouts, gives you examples of stretching. The Walk at Home is another one. There are different kinds of walks. You can have a basic walk, a short walk, a long walk. And then this is a program that comes on television. I know a number of my patients who have cable will see 3ABN, and I think at 6:30 or 7:30 in the morning, there's this Body and Spirit, which is an exercise program. And that is also very easy to follow. And you can find those programs on YouTube for different groups. So there are a lot of resources. Important things to think about activities, just to plan for it, figure out what it is that you can manage, get help or support. It's usually better when you are exercising with other persons, so you're less discouraged. And then for our setting, there are a couple of things that we must remember: that you should have properly fitting clothes. So you don't want anything that is, remember, the temperatures are very hot. So you also don't want to be exercising at a time when it's too hot, the middle of the day. So for us, the mornings or evenings might be better, that you have clothes which are comfortable and that can breathe easily, that you don't sweat and create too many problems. And then, of course, if you're doing it on the road, that you do it at a time that it's safe. If you need somebody to be with you, you go in your groups where there is safety, or you go at a time when you can see what is around you and you're not putting yourself in undue danger. You must keep hydrated, because the times are very hot. And if you're dehydrated, it makes exercise harder and could actually create some problems. So there are a couple of practical things for our setting. So we know it's not America where you have, these different things, but we can find ways to make it work. And if it's not safe to go outside, you have a number of these options. Everybody has options for online. YouTube has a lot of useful videos, and I've shared what I think are sensible ones that you can use. And there are also television programs for those who don't go on the internet that you can watch. Now, the other thing that's important for blood pressure management is this issue of stress. And we know that right now, a lot of people are living in very stressful times. There are issues because of economics, because of a lot of things that are happening. It can make it a lot harder for people to focus on things that will help to maintain their blood pressure in a normal range. And we know that when you're stressed, your heart rate will go up. And it also causes you to release hormones, which cause the blood vessels to be contracting. And so it means that when you're continually stressed, your blood pressure is likely to be high. We're not saying that every time the blood pressure is high, it's because of stress, because over time you can have blood pressure which is elevated, and you don't use stress as an excuse to say, oh, it's high just because, it's high just because. If it's high all the time, there's a problem, and don't just say that it's because of stress. But we know that stress is an important part of helping to manage blood pressure. And if we don't manage our stress, our blood pressure is going to be harder to take care of. So there's some things that we have to do to help to control what is going on. Sometimes we try to do too much. So you're trying to clean the house and cook the food and do the GSAT or the PEP and work. And sometimes that is too much. And then that creates for us a level of stress, which is unhealthy. And so being able to say no, or not trying to overcommit ourselves to too many activities, how we handle stressors when they come. So if you're in the office and you're having trouble, then how do you deal with it? You can't curse your boss if you really need the job. You just have to decide how you're going to handle the situation, that when you're feeling stressed or unhappy, that you find ways to deal with it without creating more health issues for yourself. If there's a problem, don't avoid it. Think about it with a view to make a plan to deal with it. And if you feel as though you're getting overwhelmed because the stress levels are very high, it's important to get help from people that you can trust. So one of the things that helps us to manage stress are things that we need to do every day. Even when you're busy, taking that 15 to 20 minutes to sit quietly, to do some deep breathing, to think of something peaceful, to look at plants and nature, those are very important because those help to bring down our levels of stress. Build those relationships with other persons that you can have the support during the stressful times. And these can be with your family and other persons that you have around you. And that's important because especially nowadays with computer and COVID and all these things, we've sort of isolated ourselves. We realize that the support that we get from others is an important part of stress and of our health management. Focusing on things which are positive, being grateful to others, not just taking things for granted, and then finding things that make you happy and making sure you take the time to enjoy those things. And of course, making sure you're adequately rested. And we recommend that people try to have at least 7 hours of sleep a night. That makes a big difference to your stress. So we have gone through eating. We have talked about physical activity. We have talked about stress. Those are all factors that can impact blood pressure. But if your blood pressure is high and at a certain level, then there are medications that you have to take. And I don't know why a lot of people in Jamaica are anti-medication. The medications are there to help. They're not there to make you addictive. Remember, hypertension is a lifelong condition. So it's a chronic disease. It's not going to change. Once you have it, it's a condition that you will have for life. You may control it better if you're eating better and you're more active and doing a lot of the lifestyle things that we know can help to lower blood pressure. But even with some of those conditions, if you've had it for a while, your blood pressure may not be fully reversible, and you may need to take a medication to control it. One of the important things is to take your medications as they are prescribed. A lot of people will only take them when they feel ill, their head is hurting them, or they're not sure what's going on. Then that's when they take the medication. But that's not helpful, because a lot of times people will have elevated blood pressure and it will be high, but you will have no symptoms. When symptoms are sometimes occurring, it's when it's very severe. And that's not really when we want you to use the medication, only when it's very severe. What the studies are showing is that the lower your blood pressure is, the better off you are. And the lower you can get your blood pressure, if it includes adding medication, will be giving you benefits over the long term. So if you have concerns about the tablets and using them, you really need to talk with members of your health team, because a lot of times we have concerns, but we keep them to ourselves. So I'm not sure, I don't know if I heard this medication can affect your kidney, or I heard this can be a side effect of this particular tablet, and you just don't take it. You bring it to when you come to your visit with the doctor, wherever it is you're seeing, then you bring up these concerns, because these are important. If you notice that you may be having a side effect from a medication, you must say it. I notice that, okay, my foot is a little swollen. There are multiple medications which are available. And if one medication is giving you a side effect and you need some medication to regulate your blood pressure, then there are others to choose from. And if you don't say anything, then people keep prescribing more and more and more medications. And so when you're trying to avoid taking medications, every time you come into the doctor and they're seeing that the blood pressure is high, they're adding more and more and more. So you really want to have that discussion to say what it is you're seeing, describe your concerns, but not make these decisions on your own. There's a reason why you're going to the doctor, and the doctor or whoever is seeing you must be prepared to listen and explain and discuss with you how you want to manage your condition. If a particular medication may be concerning you, then there are several options, and we have a lot of them, especially if you're being seen in government, which are free of cost, so you don't have to pay when you're filling it at the government pharmacies. We have the National Health Fund, which has subsidized a number of medications. We have generic medications, which are the same compounds as the brand ones and cost a lot less. So if you're concerned about cost and the medicines being very expensive, then the generic medications are an option, and they work just as well. Natural treatments are not a replacement for prescribed medicine. And this is one of the things that we always have the conflict with our patients over, because they want to use a lot of supplements or herbal things or try different things that they've heard about or other people are recommending. You can use them, but they may not replace your medication. Sometimes there's specific reasons why you're on some medications. The medications may be not just lowering blood pressure, but protecting the kidney or the heart, and have special benefits which you may not get from other natural treatments. So yes, we're not saying that natural treatments should not be taken, but they are sometimes not a replacement for your prescribed medication. And sometimes we may not necessarily be using natural medications, but we may get medications that are coming from over the counter. You go to the pharmacy, some of the medicines we use for pain, the Advil and some of those things can actually cause your blood pressure to go up. So if you're not sure, some of the cough medicines, if you're not sure, you can ask the pharmacist when you go in and say, you know, I have high blood pressures, it's a good pain tablet or a good cold medicine to take. Will it have any effects on my other medications? Because those can sometimes affect how well your blood pressure is controlled. So a lot of people have different issues with medications. Sometimes the issue is that people don't believe in them. But I don't know how I'll convince people, but we know that the blood pressure, if it's not controlled, leads to more problems than the medication. Sometimes people don't like the idea of all these different tablets or that they're toxic. Well, if you do the other things that you use to help regulate the blood pressure, you may not need as many tablets or may not need tablets at all. If you're exercising, eating right, getting your rest and managing your stress. But if you are on tablets, it's important that you take them consistently. Sometimes people don't take the tablets because they feel that if they don't eat, they cannot take their tablets. That's not necessarily so. You can still take your tablets even if you are not eating. It won't affect, the blood pressure tablets are not going to affect your stomach in any bad way. You may forget to take the tablets because you don't remember if I took it today. Well, things like a pill box can be very helpful. Here you see one which has the different days of the week. So if you can fill it out at the beginning of the week, put in the tablets for each day, then if you can check back and say, okay, did I take my tablet this morning? You can look back and see for sure whether you did it or not. If you are somebody who's not inclined to remember when to take their tablets, then you can tie your tablet taking to something that you do normally. So you see a lot of people have their tablets at the breakfast table. They eat their breakfast, they know when they finish their breakfast, they take their tablet right away. Or if there's another activity that they do that they're doing consistently, so if they're not eating breakfast at home, maybe they're brushing their teeth, then leave the tablets in the bathroom. So when you're brushing your teeth, you can do it at that time. You can have reminders that you can have in your phone, or other persons in your household or friends can help to remind you about your medications. Did you remember to take your tablet? And of course, a lot of times people run out of their medications between visits and before they come back. These things are things that we can get around because I know a lot of efforts are being made, even by the National Health Fund. The Health Fund card is something that's available, which will allow you to get your medications at not just government pharmacies, but private pharmacies at a subsidized cost. And they actually now have a feature for those who are being seen in the health clinics called Quick Prescript. And this is something, it's an app that you can download on your phone, or in some of the clinics, you have a machine. And what the machine does is that it allows you to scan your prescription. And if you have the app, you can take a picture and scan that app, and it goes into the system. And they can do a number of things once you're registered, including giving you reminders. So some people complain that when they go to the pharmacy, they have to spend all day there and they don't have the time. Well, you can use this app and it will have your prescription there. And when your prescription is ready, you'll get a text message to tell you that your prescription is ready. It will give you a reminder. If you're on a 28-day or a 30-day, it will tell you, okay, your medication will be ready at your pharmacy on such and such a time. You can collect it, other people can collect it for you. So there are a lot of things that we're doing now to try and make it easier for you to have your medication and not run out of anything. One of the big issues as well that people sometimes have is that when they come into the doctor's visit, it's a very tense time. I mean, you come in, you're rushing, you know, so maybe crowds if you're coming to a larger clinic at a hospital or in a health center, and there's not a lot of time for discussion. This is something I found on the American Heart Association website, which may be helpful. If you're not technology savvy, you can have somebody go in and help you with this. But what it does is that it gives you a couple of things that you may want to talk about with your doctor when you're seeing them. So I can't share this, but I'll put it in the chat. Maybe I'll just put it in the chat because that might be easiest for you to do it that way, for me to have it in the chat. And it really just asks you a couple of things around your blood pressure. So you may want to talk with your doctor and their issues. It kind of helps to frame the conversation, because when you come into the clinic and it's very busy, there's not a lot of time for conversation and discussion. And because there's not a lot of time for conversation, you kind of have to have upfront what it is you want to talk about. So is it that you want to talk about the medications and any concerns you have, side effects? Is it that you want to talk about how you can improve your blood pressure through your eating, through your exercise? Are you concerned about your risk of complications or any issues around it? This really gives you a chance to kind of think around some of these things before. If you want, you can print it and bring it to the office, or you can just write down something about what you want to discuss with the doctor about your blood pressure, or with the nurse or other members of the health team, the pharmacist, because everybody is really available to some extent to help you. Now, the last thing I'm going to talk about is a fairly new concept. This is a concept of doing your own blood pressures at home. Now, we know that when you are in the doctor's office, or you're in the clinic, or you're going somewhere else, it's a very tense time. If you have been up from 4 o'clock in the morning to get number one, or you rush out of the house without eating your breakfast, or you're fighting the crowd to make sure that you're seen in order, or you're listening out for the name to make sure you're not missed and that you have to wait another hour before you can come out, a lot of things are going on which can raise your blood pressure. And so when you are doing the blood pressure in that setting, the readings are tending to be higher than when you are doing them at home. And because the readings can be higher, you may sometimes be overtreated or be given medications when that is not necessary. And so home blood pressure monitoring is one of the things that we have been encouraging people to do, to help to understand whether their blood pressure is controlled, and bring those readings to the doctor's visit. Because when you bring those readings to the visit, then the doctor can use that, and not just the reading that you do at the time of the visit, to know whether or not any changes need to be made to your medication. So there are a few things that I'm putting this picture here to show you, because it's very important when you're going to do your blood pressure. Now, the issues in the clinic are that very often there's a lot of rush and you're pushed through. And if you are rushed and you don't do the blood pressure the right way, then you're likely to get higher readings than you need. So the first thing to remember is that before you are doing your blood pressure, you should not be eating or have anything to drink for at least 30 minutes before the blood pressure is done, because food and eating will raise the blood pressure. You should not have to go to the bathroom. So if you feel like you need to urinate or have a bowel movement, you should try and do that before you do your blood pressure. Otherwise, the readings will be higher. You should be sitting for 5 minutes before the blood pressure is checked, because the blood pressure will be high if it's done too quickly. When the blood pressure is being done, there should be no talking. So you shouldn't be on your phone or talking to other persons, because that will raise your blood pressure. You want to have your arm properly positioned. You see how the gentleman has his hand at about the level of his heart? That is where you want it to be. And even if you're doing it at home and you're doing your blood pressure at home, you want to make sure that your arm is at that level. You try not to have anything underneath the cuff that is used to measure the blood pressure. So if you have a shorter sleeve shirt or so, that is better for you to wear, because you get a better reading than when you use a long sleeve shirt. It can be a little higher. You want to make sure that your back is fully supported, so you shouldn't be sitting without anything to lean back on, and that your feet are flat on the floor when the blood pressure is being measured. So this is important, not just when you go to the clinic, but if you are deciding to do your blood pressure readings at home, you want to make sure that the blood pressure is being properly controlled. So I'm going to break from this just to show you a video. And this one is one video I'm not going to cut short. I'm going to let you see all of it that tells you about how to do this blood pressure reading at home. So let me go now to share share the screen. And this is one that I give my patients when I am asking them to do their home blood pressure monitoring, because it's very important that they do it the right way. Otherwise, even when they're doing it at home, they will get incorrect readings, which can be misleading for them and create panic.
You monitor your a real talk about blood pressure. Do you monitor yours regularly? It's something everyone with high blood pressure should do, but it's something most people don't know how to do correctly. Checking your blood pressure regularly will help let you know if you have it under control. It will also help you start to understand which factors are putting you at higher risk for stroke and heart attack. Before I get to that though, I just want to stress one thing. If you have high blood pressure, you should talk to your doctor to figure out how frequently you should be checking it at home. For most people, taking your blood pressure twice in the morning and twice in the evening, even just for a week, will help you and your doctor get a better understanding of your blood pressure. For morning readings, it's best to take those before you take your blood pressure medication. It's also very important to avoid exercise, caffeine, or tobacco at least 30 minutes prior to testing, since those can affect your levels. Now, let's move on to talk about the proper way to measure your blood pressure at home. Nearly half adults in the U.S. have high blood pressure and are at high risk for stroke and heart attack. So self-measuring is one of the easiest ways to be proactive about our health. Here I have my blood pressure monitoring device. It's easy to use and it helps me get an accurate reading. Be sure to get an automated device with the upper arm cuff. That's the type doctors recommend. The first thing you want to do is find a quiet place to sit where your back is in an upright, stable position. A dining room chair is great. You want to make sure the chair isn't too soft so your body is fully supported. Sit with your feet flat on the floor and don't cross your legs or ankles. If you need to use the bathroom, make sure you go before you do your reading. Next, rest your arm on a flat surface with your palm facing up. Place the blood pressure cuff on your bare upper arm just above your elbow. Your arm should be relaxed and resting so the cuff is at the same height as your heart. Now rest quietly for 5 minutes before taking the first measurement. Avoid talking while taking your blood pressure measurement. Once your first measurement is completed, write down the blood pressure numbers and pulse that are displayed on the device. Wait 1 minute and then repeat this process again. As you just saw, it's important to check your two measurements at around the same time each morning and evening. At your next doctor's visit, be sure to share your blood pressure numbers so you can discuss the numbers and so your care plan can be changed if necessary. That's it. Not bad, right? Measuring your blood pressure at home is easy to do and a great way to stay on top of your health. If you have more questions about managing or measuring your blood pressure overall, visit the website.
All right. So that is the last bit that we have. All right. So I think those are the main things that we wanted to talk about for blood pressure. If you want to see this video, I think we have it in the chat, but I can put it again in the chat if you want me to put it there. And then also the other resources are available in the chat that we can share if you want to see them as well. So it's 5 past the hour. So that is a challenge. So I don't know if there are any questions. I didn't see anything in the chat, but I don't know if anybody had any questions that they wanted to get answered, or any of the resources that they want to see or to be able to look at. You could just let me know. So I'm putting in the chat the one about how to do your blood pressure. If you want to look at it again, or you know somebody, and remember you saw a couple of things like the right kind of blood pressure machine to use, not the wrist one with the arm one, and that you notice that she did 2 measurements, and that's important because sometimes the first time you do the blood pressure it can be high, and then when you do it again a second time it's a little lower. So it's nice for you to do at least 2 measurements each time you do it, and we usually take the average of those readings. All right, so somebody's asking, why is blood pressure higher in the morning? Well, it usually is a little higher when you just wake up, it comes down in the day. We don't recommend that you do it immediately on waking. You can do it a little bit afterward. Sometimes when people have high blood pressure in the mornings, it can be a sign that something is wrong with their breathing in the sleep. So we have some patients that wake up with very high blood pressure when they are awake, and then in the course of the day, the blood pressure comes down. And sometimes it can be that there is a issue with not sleeping properly or breathing properly. But most people, if you are getting your blood pressure, it may be a little higher, but if you find that it's very high in the morning and it's dropping later in the day, or it's always high in the morning, but it's okay later on, there may be something else that needs to be assessed, including an issue with your sleep or your breathing during your sleep. That will help to bring it down. So the other question is which arm to use, left or right. I don't think there's any preference. No, people are prepared to use either arm for blood pressure measurement. There is sometimes a difference, but it's not that significant in terms of which one. If you notice that there is one arm that tends to be higher than the other, then we usually recommend that you keep using that one, because that one will be a better marker for your overall blood pressure control. But they're not, whether you use the left or right, they're not as concerned about that anymore. All right. Any other questions that you may have or want to ask about? So again, even though this is a topic we've spoken about, we kind of want to bring it back. And again, I'm just going to emphasize that we're seeing a lot of patients, not patients, participants who have high blood pressure. Nurse Wilson and Nurse Garwood can talk about the experiences that they've had with patients. And sometimes for us, we get a little worried because, especially when the blood pressures are very high and people are only, are not following through, checking in to see what is happening in terms of their doctors or their medications. We sometimes worry that even though we have highlighted this, it may not make a difference to the patient's long-term health. And so we just want to remind you about the high blood pressure, what the numbers mean, what is a normal blood pressure, the things that can affect our blood pressure in terms of our eating or activity or stress levels, why it's important to take our medications and have that discussion with the doctor around any concerns that you have around the medications, because we have multiple choices. If there are any issues around getting the medications because of cost, there are a lot of things that are in place that we can tap into, and you can talk to your pharmacist or your health professional around how you can use that. And we have a number of resources that are credible that you can find to figure out ways to maintain a lifestyle that will keep your blood pressure where it should be and keep you out of trouble. The home measurement is really something which is very important. And that is a new concept that we're pushing now. And so the same way that people with diabetes use their blood sugar machine to monitor themselves, that is now being encouraged that people also have a blood pressure machine that they can use to monitor their blood pressures at home and make sure that it's okay. So there's a couple of comments that I'm just going to address quickly as we wrap up. Can cool temperatures cause the blood pressure to increase? Yes, the temperatures do play a role in blood pressure. That's why sometimes they believe that in places where you have the winter, you have a higher risk of stroke and heart attack at those times. And it's thought that is related in some way to the temperatures that are occurring at that time. But we don't have necessarily that extreme of temperature in our setting. There's another comment here. Somebody's 65 and my blood pressure is 120/80 or less. And I'm told that it's normal for my age. Should I be concerned? And I'm going to say no. And normal blood pressure at any age is less than 120 as a top number and less than 80 as the bottom number. Once you're hitting 120 and hitting 80, that is abnormal. What these studies are actually showing is that even in the very old persons, because we used to be very hesitant about you being as aggressive in treating blood pressure when people got to a certain age. But what the studies have shown is that there is benefit to trying to keep the blood pressure down to less than 120 or less than 80 in even very old persons. There may be some risks, so we have to kind of balance whether, if your blood pressures are going too low and it's creating problems, dizziness, and so on, or the type of medication you're using may sometimes have side effects when we're trying to get it that low. But if you can get it to less than 120 and less than 80 safely without side effects, there are benefits that you will have in the long term to having lower blood pressure. So somebody's asking about swollen ankles from the medication causing circulatory problems. There are medications that can have swelling, can cause swelling, blood pressure medication that can cause swelling. As a side effect, you need to speak with your doctor, sometimes taking them at a different time. For instance, taking them in the evening might reduce some of that swelling. Taking it in combination with another medication might make the swelling less, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the medication is causing circulatory problems. Sometimes there are issues with circulation, which are made a little bit worse with the medication, but the medications usually do not cause circulatory problems. In fact, they are probably likely to protect you from circulatory problems. And then now the question is about what is a normal lower blood pressure. A normal blood pressure is less than 120 as a top number and less than 80. Less than 120, less than 80. That's a normal blood pressure. So if your blood pressure tends to be at the lower end, 106, 105, 65, that's good. That's normal. So as I said, once it's hitting the 120 as a top number and it's hitting the 80, you're now moving from normal into an abnormal level. Doesn't necessarily mean that you have hypertension or that you need medications, but it's an indication for you that your blood pressure is not where it should be and you want to try and keep it down. So the lower you can keep the blood pressure, the better. And all the studies now, there's really, when you look at the data, the people who have the lowest blood pressure are the ones who have the lowest risk of stroke and heart attack. Lowest risk. So the lower you can keep your blood pressure and be safe, the lower your risk of complications. All right, so this is a question about the water pills. The water pills are what we call diuretics. That is one kind of blood pressure medication. Not everybody needs it. You can discuss with your doctor if it's not one that you like, whether this is an appropriate blood pressure medication for you. Some people can't manage it because they have to work or they have to take the bus. And if they take the tablet and it's going to make them urinate, they're going to get in trouble. So there are multiple options. So you don't have to always use a water pill. Sometimes there are specific reasons why you may be put on one, maybe because of heart or other issues or kidney issues. But there are a number of options that you can choose from. And if one medication is giving you side effects or it's not convenient because of work or other commitments, this is what you have to talk about. Don't just not take it and then end up with a stroke. Go to the doctor and say, I cannot take this medicine because I have to take the bus to work. It's 2 hours on the bus. And if I take it, I cannot miss it, or I cannot take it. I stop taking it when I'm going on the road. Is there something else I can use, or is this medicine critical? And is it are there any options? That's something you have to talk about. You have to ask and discuss it and see what options are there. All right, so somebody's saying some people get blackouts. Well, if you're not getting blackouts and your blood pressure is less than 120 and less than 80, you are fine. So the lower the blood pressure is, and that's what all the data is showing, even what we have been using as high blood pressure, they are now feeling that that is too high, because there's no point at which you have a special, everything is fine till you get to 120. If your blood pressure is less than 120, your risk is even better than somebody whose blood pressure is 120, 130, 140, 160. As you go up, the risk goes up. increases gradually. So the lower you can keep your blood pressure and keep it in a safe range, the better off you are generally. All right, so I think that's about it. It's 1/4 past, a little later than our usual time. Thanks for the feedback and the questions. I hope you find the resources, they are useful. We can share them with you again. I think Joyce will send them on WhatsApp if you want to look at any of the things that we looked at. Remind yourself of any of the details. Remember, if you have any questions, feel free to bring it up with your doctor, remember, or your nurse, whoever it is, a pharmacist, because if you don't say anything, then you go away with misconceptions and you won't get the benefits of a lot of the things that we know now about how to manage and treat these conditions better. So thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us. This is a monthly program, usually last Thursday of the month. So we'll meet again in about a month's time, the last Thursday of July. Thank you very much. All the best.
Thank you too, Doc.
Okay, thank you. Have a good night.